Welcome to Check-In with Jason Lauritsen, where we explore how to create human, connected workplaces that employees love and that fuel organizational success. Each week, I invite someone who is leading the way in this work to join me for a conversation to help educate and inspire us. My guest today is Erin Corr Miller. She's the Chief People Officer at Terra Dotta. As a passionate and experienced human resources, people development, diversity, equity, and inclusion professional, she's played an integral part in leading strategies to create inclusive and high-performing cultures. Erin, thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. When you reached out, I was very excited to say yes.
Awesome. Well, we always have great conversations, and I expect this to be the same. Before we get into digging into talking about your work and some of the cool stuff that you're doing, can you tell us a little bit more about your organization and your role to just kind of help us set the context for what we're going to chat about?
Terra Dotta is a software platform that has been around for 20 plus years, and universities use our software to facilitate all of their study abroad programs. So really our mission is encouraging and getting more people into international studies.
Cool. Well, I as someone who is soon to have a college freshman and another one a few years after that, I hope that they have the opportunity to interact with your software, because that's an experience I hope that they will have. Can you tell us a little bit about the organization itself, just for context? How big is it? Are you remote versus on-site? Like, what does that look like?
Of course, a majority of our organization is remote. We have grown quite a bit in the last year. Right now, we're at 95 full-time employees with about 110 contractors. And about 25% of those folks work a hybrid schedule coming into our Chapel Hill office here in North Carolina.
And the other 75% are remote?
Remote, 100%.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then in your role, tell me a little bit about your role in the organization.
Yeah, so as Chief People Officer, I partner with our CEO and set all of our people strategy. And that covers our professional development, ensuring people understand what success looks like in their role, doing manager training, as well as looking at employee engagement and compensation and benefit strategy. So
you've got the whole spectrum, all the HR stuff in your kind of in your purview.
Yeah.
I always love to learn a little bit more about people's background and kind of how they found their way into this work. So I'm curious, for you, how and why did you make your way into the world of HR work? What did that look like for you?
It was accidental. During my time with the Motley Fool, I had joined that organization and I was on their sales team. I sold advertising for Fool.com. And after I had my first child, I was not wanting to travel as much as I did. And so I went to the Chief People Officer, Lee Burbage at the time, and just mentioned to him, I said, hey, I feel like my lifestyle is changing a little bit. I need to shift some priorities. And I love the Fool. I would love to continue to be here. And I just wanted to explore other opportunities where I might be able to make an impact. And he said, everyone knows who you are. People have brought up, when I have a sticky situation or I'm not sure how to communicate something, they would come to me. And so Lee said, let's test out a little time for you to be on the people team. And so when I came back from maternity leave, I joined the people team and I started doing individual check-ins with different employees, really kind of focusing on the high performers at first. And after doing probably 40 or so check-ins, I had a bunch of data that told me the individuals that were at the Fool at that time were really looking for more coaching and development. And so in the work I did with Lee and the rest of the team, we created the coaching program at the Motley Fool. And then I was moved into the director of people development, where I was the coach's coach. And so there were about 30 cross-functional coaches at the Motley Fool, and employees could sign up to meet with any coach of their choice. And that really fueled a lot of the professional development and feedback that we were trying to build into the culture at the Fool at the time.
What a great place to start in HR. I mean, because Lee obviously is kind of a certainly one of the people that has broke the mold for what it means to lead HR. That organization has done so many cool things. Interviewed him for my book for Unlocking High Performance and just was blown away by some of the stuff. So what a great place to start. So I'm curious today. So fast forward, right? You've been through a few other roles and are leading an HR function now yourself. What do you love most about this work? What keeps you in it?
Yeah, I think what keeps me in it is just seeing the impact of my day-to-day work on employees and individuals. And, I always say work is a relationship, not a contract. And leading the charge in how businesses can approach this relationship with employees is really impactful work. It's wonderful to see when we put a plan together and employees respond in a positive way, or even when employees respond in a negative way, being able to open up the dialogue to figure out what did we get right, where do we need to change, and how do we keep moving forward to make sure the business is getting what they're needing and the individuals are also feeling valued and enjoying their work.
Well, I love that you say that, because it's like in any relationship, it's easy when the relationship is going well. It's not hard to be in a good relationship, right? I mean, when everything's clicking, like that's fun and that's easy. The real work happens when things don't go quite right or somebody messes up. Like, what do you do after that? That's really the work. And it sounds like that's where you have excelled, at least from what you've said. It sounds like that's kind of like, you'll step into that and you encourage other people to step into that to sort of do the real work of relationship.
Absolutely. And it's really about not making it perfect from the jump. I was certified as an agile coach. And one thing that I learned from there is, get something 80%, test it on a few people, get feedback, iterate. And, that's something I think I learned at the Motley Fool, where we never released a program to every single person. It was, let's try it on this team. Let's get feedback. Okay, we've taken that feedback. Now let's iterate, try it on another team, see where we are with that. So by the time you roll out a program across the organization, you've had multiple opportunities for feedback. And so it's more likely to have that buy-in from employees because they've seen a collaborative effort versus this is an HR policy that we're going to put in front of you that you have to take.
It reminds me when you say that, I remember in my conversation with Lee years ago, and I've quoted him on this many times, is he said, we were talking about some, process or sort of the resistance sometimes that managers will have to doing some performance processes or whatever. And I remember him saying, like, if your managers aren't using the process, or if employees are resisting some kind of HR process that you've created for them, that means your process is poorly designed. It's a bad process. It's not their fault. It is a bad process. And that has always stuck with me. That is not how most HR does it. It sounds like that has stuck with you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, being collaborative, and also when you roll it out team by team. And again, this is specific to, the size organizations that I've been in. It may not work to scale if I had 10,000 employees, but going with that approach, it also creates a little bit of buzz where when we rolled out the coaching program, we started with a small group and employees started talking. And so it was like, oh, how did you get a coach? How do I get a coach? And so it also creates kind of that, what is it? I want
like
what
some
they
FOMO.
have.
Yeah.
Yes, FOMO.
Yeah.
There it is, FOMO.
Yeah.
And then you also have created culture carriers where it's not just the people team saying you should do this. It's individual employees saying, hey, I tried it. It was good. This is what I'm getting out of it.
Well, and it sounds like too, the way you're approaching things, both there and now, is like, I think through that too, you also create some shared ownership, and people feel like they've participated in building whatever whatever it is, or providing feedback, and then they have a vested interest in seeing it succeed too. And that's really powerful.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the ownership piece is really key. Anytime you can give someone agency over what's happening in their career or how they're developing, again, it's that sense of ownership.
Yeah, indeed. Well, let's transition, because the conversation that I would like to have with you, that we kind of teed up when we were planning for this conversation, is one that I suspect a lot of people will relate to. Either they've been in the position, I know I have, or they will be someday. But you are a little over a year into your role. As I understand it, you came into an organization with an underdeveloped HR function. HR had a poor reputation with, it sounds like, both probably employees and leaders. And your job was to fix that, right? To not only build effective HR, but to restore that reputation and sort of bring people into some kind of relationship with HR. And so I would love to unpack that and talk about kind of what your experience has been and how that works. But can you talk first about what did you inherit? What did it look like when you arrived? And what did you know, like when you looked at it, what was the work that you saw ahead of you that was most important?
Yeah, so when I was going through the interview process and then eventually joined Terra Dotta, one of the areas, a few of the areas that needed focus were trust and transparency. There wasn't a lot of that in place. And again, I want to be sympathetic to people who've come before me. And, I think everyone does the best that they can. And then other things happen. So again, joining, it was about, okay, how do we build trust with our employee base? How do we be more transparent with how's the business doing? What are some of the challenges? And then how do we create that trust and transparency so that we can actually get honest, authentic feedback to help us improve? And, Ben Pasilis, the CEO of Terra Dotta, he's done an amazing job setting the tone of trust and transparency, open door policy, making it safe for employees to tell him the honest feedback. And so when I came in, I kind of rode on his coattails a little bit for those first few months. But now I've been able to build a track record of trust, confidentiality. When someone gives me feedback or we talk about a program, I take that feedback and then I go back to the employees and say, hey, I heard you. This is what we've changed. This is how we're going to do it going forward. And, when I started, I told my CEO, any type of culture change for our size of organization is going to take 12 to 18 months. And so now we're kind of hitting that 14-month mark. And so I'm still looking at, okay, over the next 4 to 6 months, what else do we need to be doing? But it was really about the foundation of trust and transparency.
So as you saw that and you're arriving, you probably heard about that, I would assume, and even in your conversations prior to arriving, that this was going to be part of the work. What was the plan? Like when you came in, when you said, okay, I'm coming in, I need to build trust, we need to establish this transparency. What was the strategy? What kinds of early things did you commit to doing that, in hindsight, were effective?
Yes, when I came in, the first 60 to 90 days, it really was about observation. I booked one-on-ones with leaders. I asked them, what do you think is going well? What do you think could be going better? Then I started doing one-on-one employee check-ins. And one thing I uncovered early was, Terra Dotta, the employee base, they really are a community. There's a strong level of connection. And so I felt that was really wonderful because even going through challenges and things like that, the employees really are committed to the mission. They want to be here. They want to do the work. And so after probably 30 to 40 check-ins, I felt confident enough that we could run our first employee engagement survey. And so we did that at about my 3-month mark. And really the plan was to take it slow, listen, and be 100% honest and transparent with my goal, what's my people philosophy, how do I work with others. And the other part that was really important to me was having a high level of confidentiality and letting employees know if we have a one-on-one meeting, I'll take notes. Those notes are mine. If I feel that you've shared something with me that would be beneficial for me to share with our CEO or with the other leaders, I will ask your permission to share what I've seen. And I think that also really helped build trust, because I think for some folks, they feel like, oh, I just met with HR and they took notes, and now who sees those notes? And so I was very clear about my intention with the data and the conversations that we were having.
Yeah, you were creating not only clear expectations, but kind of putting some boundaries in place for them to help them feel more safe or more clear about what that looked like. So initially commitment to listening and observing and understanding. The survey goes out, you get information. What came next after that then? So you have all of this observation now about strengths and probably opportunities and what's going on or whatever. What did you do next? What were the next big steps?
So I'm a big believer in data-driven decisions, especially because sometimes the loudest voices don't actually represent the number of people. It might just be one or two. And so after the employee engagement survey, after doing the employee check-ins, I had a plan to focus on really the foundation of a great HR team. One is creating job descriptions. There were a lot of folks that hadn't had job descriptions, setting expectations with the managers and their individual employees. Are we doing enough to set these individuals up for success? Some people told me, I don't know if I'm doing a good job, and I actually don't know what a good job looks like in this role. And so really clarifying expectations was a big part. The other part was bringing in performance management cycles. A lot of folks had said, I haven't had a performance review in 2 years. And so it was really setting the foundation of, okay, let's make sure everyone has a job description. Let's make sure every manager is communicating what success looks like in that role. And then let's make sure that everyone on their anniversary date, we have a formal performance conversation where we let them know, what are you doing well? And then what are your areas of development? And what part of that development are you going to own? And then what part of that development can the company support you on?
Well, I love that, because it reminds us that I think, so many organizations, and particularly within HR, there's so much discussion about performance processes, right? And I think it's so encouraging to hear or remind all of us that people actually do crave good performance processes. They crave clarity. They crave helpful feedback. They crave development. They crave coaching. We hate bad performance processes.
Yeah.
That's what we hate. It's not a resistance to performance overall or management overall. It's just bad processes trigger bad reactions, and good processes are actually the things that we crave and need. And so that's really reassuring. How have you found, what has been the reception to that? What has been the impact of addressing those gaps?
The employees have loved it. I think for a few folks, they were like, this is my first time of having a job description in the 5 years that I've worked at Terra Dotta. And so again, that clarification is really important. It also gives them, kind of, what is my North Star? What am I working toward? And also just really trying to bring feedback loops into the culture has been a focus. And as you said, people like a performance process if it's a good process. One thing that we're really focused on is encouraging the managers, but also encouraging the employees. You can have performance conversations anytime. It doesn't have to have a process. It doesn't have to have a template. It can be a Friday morning, hey boss, what do you think I'm doing well? What's the one thing I need to pay attention over the next month where you feel like I need to step up? And that's a 10-minute conversation. And when you get to the point where you can have those discussions as employees and managers, it takes the sting away. It gets a little more comfortable. It's conversational. Or, even better, if someone can walk into their boss's office and say, hey, I just really screwed up. This is where I think I missed. What is your perception, or how did you see it?
Yeah. Well, and back to that is profoundly powerful. And I love that it goes all the way back to the work as a relationship, is that underneath that, at least what I have found is that, as you're building trust, and it sounds like you kind of have a culture maybe that's grounded in trust and connection. The more trust that exists, the easier those conversations get to have, because now we're just having conversations about work, right? And work is performance, and it's not defensive because it's not some vague, weird, out of left field kind of curveball that I wasn't expecting. Now it's something I do expect, and we have all the time. It's just part of our relationship is talking about performance. So that's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's very good. And thinking through the first couple of months when I arrived, in order to nurture the connection that was happening, I brought on Donut. I don't know if you've heard of Donut.ai. It's a great Slack integration. And it was also a way to connect our remote contractors with our full-time employees. They work very collaboratively. And so having somebody jump in the Donut channel, you're automatically paired with a random employee every 2 weeks. It also really brought up a lot of people where it was like, oh, I didn't know that was the work you did, or, talking about just projects that they're working on, but also carving out time just to connect as humans, understanding where do they live, what do they do when they're not at work, why do they like working at Terra Dotta, what's one thing that is challenging that they would love help on. And, just continuing to nurture that connection has been really important for us.
So let's talk about that a little bit more, because I think this is such a powerful tool. And actually, in an earlier episode, Andrea Herron was the guest. We talked about they have used peer mentoring sort of broadly, which is maybe a bit more structured approach than what Donut does. But talk to us about what does that look like exactly? So what is the employee experience of that? If I want to participate, because the point of it, as I understand, Donut is to sort of randomly pair you up with other employees just for kind of a coffee conversation, right? To get to know each other, connect. But can you talk us through the mechanics of it? Like, what does it actually look like from an employee's perspective?
Yeah, so from an employee's perspective, you jump in the channel, you do get a random employee that you're paired with. And for the employees, it's really easy to schedule. They jump on the meeting, and then we try to give them prompts of, here are some questions to ask, because I think for some people it could be awkward. You could get on there and neither one of you could be like, I don't know what to say. And so we try to give them prompts, ask, how long have you been at Terra Dotta? What do you like about your job? What's a new hobby that you're taking on? What kind of food do you like? Just kind of random prompts like that. And we upped the ante a little because we're remote, and, you get to see people face to face not very frequently. We added in a selfie contest. And so after every Donut meeting, we encouraged people to take a photo. And, we work with some really creative people. And so, we had different backdrops. We had people eating donuts on their Donut meeting. And then every 2 weeks, all the selfie photos are put in there. And then as an organization, we vote, okay, which one did we love the best? And so again, it's about creating the one-on-one connection, but then it's about, okay, sharing here. If you and I had a Donut meeting, we would take a photo, and then I would put it in the channel and say, these are all the things I learned about Jason, had no idea about XYZ. And, whoever gets Jason next on their donut meeting, be sure and ask him about X. And so again, it's just building on the community one-on-one, but then creating more broadly, so that others are also learning about each other.
I love it. I love it. It's the simple power of, connection is built through conversations, right? And so using a tool like that just to create and foster those conversations is so powerful. So kudos to you and the team for doing that. And kudos to your leadership for making the time, right? Creating the time for people to have those conversations, because I think that's oftentimes one of the things that gets in the way of stuff like this is people are like, yeah, we're too busy. We don't have time to be just having random conversations. And I'm always like, you don't have time not to, right? When you see the power of it. But that's really great. Kudos.
That's true. Thank you. And yeah, with Donut, I would say it's definitely been fun, and it's not a mandate. And I always tell people, if you have a busy month coming up or a busy couple of weeks, just leave the channel for a couple of weeks and then come back when it makes sense. And again, when you don't force something on someone, you give them agency, they're going to be more apt to join and participate if they feel like they have a little bit of flexibility.
Yeah. And if it's valuable to them, they keep coming back. The fact that you're not mandating it and they're using it, that's a pretty good sign that it's valuable. So my last question on this is, as you look back, you've laid out kind of, I think, a really interesting and helpful kind of roadmap if you're stepping into a situation like this. Mm-hmm. As you look back over the last year or a little bit more, I guess two things. One is, what has been your biggest learning? Mm-hmm. And number two is, what's one thing that you would do differently if you got to do it over again?
Oh, man. Okay. And I just have to give you one because I've made a lot of mistakes.
You can, whatever you want. I'm not one for rules, so at least one. Let's do that.
I will give you one. Let's see here. So the first question relating to what's been the biggest challenge?
Learning.
Yeah. Okay. I would say the biggest learning, and this is something that I have to work on all the time. When I get an idea, I get very excited and I'm like, okay, let's do this. And the biggest learning that I feel like I've had to do over the last couple of years is remembering that my excitement and my understanding of the idea is not going to be met with the same energy. And getting time with people, with the leadership team, getting buy-in, using my influence to say, hey, this is something that's really important to me. And instead of saying, okay, let's do this, I've started to say, what do you like about this idea? And what do you think I'm missing? Or where do you think this is going to go wrong? Again, kind of establishing that ownership. And, I think as people leaders, we get excited to roll out an HR policy or an HR strategy. It's like, yes, we're going to do this. But the more we can take those initial steps slow in the beginning, get that buy-in, get that feedback, the adoption of the program is going to be so much better. Again, going back to what we talked about before, if you build in some of that ownership and then also show, hey, I want to collaborate with you on this, and how do we roll this out? And so again, that's something that I have to pay attention to. It's a blind spot of mine. I get excited. I'm like, yes, roll it out. And then I'm like, ooh, I actually forgot about 10% of the things that should have been in there. So that's my biggest one.
That's great. That's great advice. Mm-hmm. Is there one thing in particular, as you look back, that you wish you would have done differently in your first year?
In my first year, you just wanted, okay, I guess we're going to go there, Jason.
This is the fun stuff, right? This is the learning you can share so others don't have to do it.
Yes. No, the one thing I would say is, coming here in the first year, one of the top priorities for the senior leadership team was absolutely rolling out performance reviews. And I think we got a good process in place. We had individuals do a self-review, managers do a review, and then we looked for, okay, where are they aligned? Where are the gaps? And one thing I wish I would have done earlier last year before we rolled out performance reviews was spend more time one-on-one with our managers talking about, each of the different personas. What does a high-performing persona look like? What is that high performing employee? What is a strong or solid employee look like? And then who are the employees that need development? Because what I found after we did the reviews is that a high percentage of our organization was put into the exceeds expectations category. And so what that taught me was, we need more management training to look at, what does performance look like, and just defining those personas. It also shows me, again, that really strong connection. If you have a really tight relationship with someone and you've never gone down the path of really sharing honest feedback, as a manager, you're always going to rate them really high because you're kind of avoiding the tough conversation.
Yep. Well, and based on what you said earlier too, there was I'll call it a bit of a vacuum of clarity, right? Mm-hmm. And I think I have found that I often tell leaders and managers, let clarity do the heavy lifting. If you have clear expectations and clear job descriptions and clear even behavioral expectations, then when you sit down to talk about these things, they already know, right? And you talk about what they've done versus this clear expectation and where that stacks. So it's not on you necessarily sort of arbitrarily or subjectively making a judgment on them. So it helps remove some of that. So it seems that makes sense to me that would have been what happened the first time through, because if you don't have that to fall back on, then it's that much more complicated because it is purely relationship. And then that gets really tricky.
It does. Absolutely. And I love what you just said, let clarity do the heavy lifting. Can I use that? Can I steal that?
You can, of course. Of course. Okay. Of course.
Good.
All right. Well, let's transition. Thank you for sharing all that. That is incredibly helpful guidance. I want to ask a couple of questions that, I think I prepped you for these. You knew these were coming. So number one, what is a big challenge or obstacle you are wrestling with right now at work, and how are you tackling it?
Honestly, one of the biggest things that I am seeing is possibly some burnout. Our employees are very focused, very dedicated to the work that we're doing. And again, going back to clarity, I feel like for a lot of our employees, because they don't have those clear expectations, they're boiling the ocean. They're doing everything. Everything is a priority, and that's just not sustainable. And so I think over the next year, really helping our leadership team and our managers understand what are the top 3 or 4 things that we absolutely need to get done, and then how do we channel that energy into those priorities. And all the other things may just have to come off the plate. I think that's one thing that I'm seeing. Well,
and that, again, like you said, your clarity is going to help a ton with that. I find that one of the challenges that I hear so often is that when you don't have that clarity, or if you're in a high performance organization and you're not, really managing expectations and boundaries, you're not answering the question, how much is enough? Right? So if you don't know where enough is, then the answer is always more. Always more, always more. And it's not always ill-intentioned. It's not always malicious from leadership. It's just, if you don't tell me how much is enough and I'm really passionate and committed, I just keep going and I keep going and I go until I fall over. And so I'm glad that that flag is going up. I think that's happening for a lot of people, is my sense of that. That's not an uncommon challenge.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I would say that's one of the big ones. I think the other one is just continuing to, rigorously look at job descriptions, expectations. Do we have outcomes clearly aligned with, the needs of the business? And do the employees understand what does success look like in my role? And can they get there?
Hmm. Hmm. Excellent. Yeah. So last big question for you is a question about the future. I always like to kind of wrap up here, anchor in some aspiration. And when you think about work 5 years from now, so think about 5 years in the future, what's one thing you hope will be different about work then than it is today?
So there's a couple of things here, and I don't want to get in trouble by anyone, but a 4-day work week for knowledge workers, I feel like a 4-day work week would actually be really, really wonderful. I think for so many of us, we work when we have to. We now get some flexibility, but there is something to be said when you get a little more free space. That's when you can create new ideas. That's when you can think through, okay, what is this thing that I'm going to roll out? And have I looked at every angle? And it's really hard to do some of that work when you're always grinding and you don't have that free space. And again, I think I say that, and it comes from a place of privilege, because I know not everyone's organization and not everyone's job would allow that. But I think, I've seen some of the companies out here that are testing the 4-day work week, and they're not seeing a decrease in productivity. And again, especially here in America, I think we're really bad at our well-being. And I think over the next 5 years, and just as we continue to grow our organizations, if we don't prioritize the well-being of our employees, it's not going to serve us well in the long run. And that means making time for breaks, making time for vacation, making time to get a workout in every day, making sure you're getting 8 hours of sleep. Just going back to the foundation of, we have to take care of ourselves. And I think organizations need to do more to nurture that journey for individuals. Yeah. What do you think of that?
I like it. Well, okay. I think it's a call to, whether it's the 4-day work week or whether it's just, I think this conversation has largely a common theme is focusing around really getting clear about what performance looks like and what our objectives are and how much then is required to achieve those objectives, and being very clear about how much is enough from employees. And so they can then have the support and the freedom and the flexibility to take that time, right? To capture that time. I think the 4-day work week for me, I have always thought it's interesting because I think the 4-day work week is a structural way of trying to deal with the fact that we're not good at bounding that, what we expect from employees in terms of effort and commitment and time and that. And so, which sometimes that's what's required, right? That's where we start is like, well, if we can get the same amount of work done in 4 days as we do in 5, what does that suggest about the way that we're working? So I would definitely co-sign that experience or that experiment at scale, because I think we'd learn an awful lot. So I'm in. Let's do it. Let's try it.
All right. Let's absolutely do it. I'm ready.
All right.
And then the other thing I wanted to bring up is just, what do I hope for work is one thing that we're starting to do here. And again, I learned this at the Motley Fool. I'm rolling out Colby A assessments. It is an assessment of cognitive strength, and it basically gives you your style of how you approach problems. And, anytime you can have someone use their strengths in an area of the business where they can make an impact and they love what they're doing, that is the perfect trifecta. And, I think for the future of work, we work in a little more job crafting where it's let's really understand who you are, what you're good at, how can we channel that in an area where you can really make an impact on the business, and let's test it and iterate down the road if we need to. But I feel like sometimes with some organizations, they've got the job description and there's typically 1,000 things on there that are just never going to happen. That person doesn't exist. And then it's like puppy training because someone's not doing well or someone's not understanding what's happening. And so it's like, no, don't do that, or back up, you got to go this way. And actually, if you took a big step back and just understood more about what is this individual's strengths, and do we have them in the right role, or do we need to make a change? And I think if we can go down that path further, businesses will win, employees will feel really good because they're working on something they love and something that they're good at.
Yeah, agreed. I love that as an aspiration too, or as a just thinking more broadly about inviting and finding ways to actively engage people more fully, right? And this is why I think it's interesting that I think the conversation for those of us that I think are serious about this work, we know that this is what the work of inclusion and diversity and equity is all about. It's about performance. It's about inviting sort of the best and fullest contributions of people at work, right? So that we can all succeed. And so I am also co-signing that.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah. And the last thing I will say, getting on the topic of DEI, I've always felt DEI is not an initiative. It's either who you are or who you are not. And it's always been a system based on merit. And I think, again, going forward, it's about creating inclusive cultures, creating a strong sense of belonging at our companies, and ensuring you've got the best and brightest, and having the opportunity for different perspectives to be heard is really how we're going to innovate and change.
Yeah, agreed. And diverse teams outperform non-diverse teams every time, so long as you can do what you talked about and you can leverage and unleash the strengths and the perspectives and all the uniqueness that is inside of every individual. And so it's really important, really powerful work. So I hope it gets amplified, or this moment in time amplifies the importance of this work going forward.
Agreed.
All right. So we're at the end. So I always ask for a one-word checkout. So in one word, Erin, how are you feeling as we wrap up our conversation today?
One word. I would say hopeful.
And for me, I will say optimistic. So thank you for that. That is all your gift to me today. And I hope it's a gift to everyone that gets to hear this conversation. So for those that would like to connect with you, where's the best place to do that?
The best place is LinkedIn. I'm Erin Corr Miller.
And we will include that link and contact info in the episode description for those that would like to connect with Erin. Erin, thank you for joining me. This was really helpful in terms of, I think there's such great actionable advice in here. So I really appreciate you making the time and sharing so freely.
Absolutely. It's always good to have a conversation with you, Jason, and hopefully I'll see you in real life soon.
Well, let's hope. And thank you for listening. I hope you take some of these insights or some advice that Erin has shared and take it back to your organization and put it to work to make a real difference. There's some really good stuff in here today. And as we wrap up, please remember to check in with those who matter most to you. Maybe the most important thing you can do today. Until next time.